Welcome to the Attention Deficit Disorder Expert Podcast Series by Attitude Magazine.
Thank you for joining today's event, which we call Mental Health Out Loud. It's a new type of conversation where the editors of Attitude, along with leading experts in the fields of ADHD and mental health, will speak out loud about topics that are still too often kept quiet and hidden. Today, we're here to discuss how to de-escalate explosive stress reactions, specifically in emotionally dysregulated children, adolescents, and even adults with ADHD. Helping us to navigate this nuanced and important conversation today on mental health is an esteemed friend and contributor to Attitude, Dr. Bill Dodson.
Thank you.
We're always happy to see Dr. Dodson. He's not only a great friend to Attitude, he's also a board-certified adult psychiatrist, one of the first practitioners to specialize in adults with ADHD 25 years ago. He's the recipient of the National Maxwell J. Schleifer Award for Distinguished Service to Persons with Disabilities in 2006. He was named a Life Fellow of the American Psychiatric Association in 2012 in recognition of his contributions to the field of adult ADHD. Dr. Dodson continues to have private consulting practice in Denver, Colorado, and we are incredibly honored that he sits on the medical advisory panel for Attitude. Dr. Dodson, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's great to be here. Thanks.
Before we start our conversation, I have just a couple of housekeeping items to get out of the way. Those of you tuned into the live event, you can submit questions at any time to Dr. Dodson by navigating to the text box, which is right under your video player. We will do our best to weave in those questions throughout today's conversation. And if you support the work we're doing here at Attitude, we encourage you to visit attitudemag.com/subscribe and sign up for Attitude Magazine. If you subscribe now, you will receive our fall issue, which features resources relevant to today's conversation, namely some really great articles on bullying, childhood anxiety, and how parents can talk to anxious children about school violence specifically. Dr. Dodson, thank you so much again for joining us. I will launch right in. The topic today is about de-escalating explosive stress reactions. What do you mean by de-escalation? What does that look like? And why are these strategies particularly important for families and educators who are helping children who have ADHD?
Being overwhelmed by your own emotions is part of having a life. Sometimes everybody gets that way. It also is part of every psychiatric diagnosis. It's one of the things that's most disruptive. No one likes being overwhelmed and out of control. In ADHD, it now has become the emotional component of the diagnosis. In Europe, for instance, they've added a fourth core feature of ADHD. They're calling it emotional dysregulation, which is a much fancier term than we're using today, but it's exactly the same thing. It is a core impairment in just about everyone's life who has ADHD, that they cannot keep control of the level and intensity of their own emotions. And they just get carried away, and with it, they take the entire family. So what de-escalation is we really can't expect somebody who has been swept away by the events that are going on and their own emotions. Is how do we help that person share in our sense of calmness? How can we be good role models for our children and our adolescents, sometimes our spouses? to basically create or recreate a culture in which reason can be heard. Once somebody loses control of their emotions, forget about doing anything constructive. Nothing's going to happen. You have to sort of get back to that place where people can hear each other. So that's what de-escalation is and its purpose.
And you've said before in various articles for Attitude that really this emotional dysregulation is a core component of ADHD, though maybe not, well, definitely not included in the DSM.
No.
It is.
It is in Europe, though. If you look at the consensus guidelines that have been published in the European Union ever since 2018, they include emotional dysregulation. And there's a very big component of the literature in the U.S. Advocating that emotional dysregulation be made a core feature, diagnostic feature of ADHD. Again, we have to wait around for the American Psychiatric Association to update the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, but they should have done that 3 years ago. So they're going to be doing it sometime soon, and everybody wants to make sure that this one gets on the table.
Right. I will mention to our listeners that you wrote a great article about deficient emotional self-regulation, which we will include in the resources so you can learn more about this in the realm of ADHD. But the bottom line is that if you are dealing with an emotionally dysregulated child, student, spouse, self, this is an almost universal phenomenon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're also giving me credit for Russ Barkley's work.
Oh my goodness, I did. See, that's what happens when I go unscripted. Okay.
Yeah, the deficient emotional self-regulation, say that 3 times real fast, is Russ Barkley's work.
Yes, of course. Also brilliant, like yourself.
Yes.
So my apologies. It is a great background article, nonetheless.
It is, nonetheless, it's a great background article, and it really gives you the points that are being argued about right now. And we're trying to figure all this out as well. So that's a caveat. This is a work in progress. It's like trying to assemble the plane while we're in flight, but it is probably the hot topic in the field right now.
Okay. I did want to send you right away a question that we received from one of our readers. And this is not an uncommon one. They wrote in to say, what's the best way to support my 8-year-old with ADHD through explosive anger during which he's physically aggressive toward others in our family? I want to support and de-escalate, but trying to physically restrain him from hurting his brother or running away outside is getting harder the older he gets.
Yeah. Wow. Yes, you're exactly right. That's a huge problem. As long as he is small, you can just hold him for the 4 or 5 minutes it'll take for him to stop struggling and start to just sort of come down from that. It's getting a physical constraint because he doesn't have the ability to have constraints coming from within inside him. Once people get older than that, it's a pretty hard technique to do. But if you think about, when anybody is upset, one of the first things we do is we hug them. Not just a little, quick, is hug and hold to help them know that they can't exceed certain limits. When you ask people, what are you afraid of? Death comes in third. losing control of yourself is second, and fear of losing your mind is first. So that's the level of emotional torture these people are going through, and it's very easy to lose track of that when they're throwing things at you and screaming obscenities, and you're wondering, where did a 5-year-old learn that word? So that's a technique that works. Sometimes just walking away. Some kids want to get you upset with them, and that's their goal. And so you can say, I see that you've lost control of yourself. I'll be back in a few minutes, and during that time, you can get a grip, and then we'll sit down and talk about this. But you want to avoid that situation where blowing up is rewarded and enabled, because otherwise, that's going to be a steady diet, because they know they can get you off of anything you want to do. The whole family has to come to a screeching halt while they engage with him to her over this, a lot of times, a temper tantrum. I wish there was some clear label that would appear on the kid's forehead to tell you what the cause at that particular moment is of this breakdown. But there's going to be as many causes as there are kids and adolescents. Usually it's the same sort of thing for a given individual, but often it's very hard to tell exactly what's going on. So the sort of axiom number one is you actually don't have to know the cause. The goal is the behavior and how to get the person to quiet. And you can just make comments on what's going on. I see that you're very upset. You want to get them talking to you rather than having a fit. You can say things like, it must be very difficult to be out of control the way you are. Is there some way I can help? Or what would be helpful to you right now in getting this under control so that you can feel better? You can actually have the child as teacher. Teach me what to do here. And I'm always surprised. The kid will just tell you in a very articulate way what would be helpful to them in that moment. So and it also gives them a sense of power. Sort of I know what to do to get control, but I'm so out of control I can't do it type of thing, which is very frustrating to them. So that's the type of thing. Trying to reason with them in the moment is impossible. The emotions have to be under some sort of regulation before you can do anything constructive. So,
right. Okay. Very helpful. Important to remember that knowing and doing are two very distinct things. And that
very distinct.
Right.
If they could do, they would have done.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. So there's got to be some barrier that's some challenge that's keeping them from doing what they know. And the trick is discerning how to help them overcome that barrier. Now, in the case where there is physical and or emotional abuse targeted towards siblings or perhaps classmates, in the case of an educator, is it the caregivers or educators' first response to ensure the safety of others?
There's a rule when you're on an inpatient psychiatric unit and something like this happens. Your first goal is to keep yourself safe. If you feel you're going to be hurt, pack up and get out. If you then have any energy left over, you protect the rest of the staff, you protect other people. And then if you have anything left after that, then you take care of the person who's out of control. Because unless you're strong, unless you are not afraid for your safety, you can't do anything, because the person will pick up your sense of anxiety, and it's very easy for you to get overwhelmed. A lot of parents, I think, can go back and recreate in their own minds an instant like this where they got sucked into the tornado and got upset and overwhelmed. And it's impossible to think when you're in the moment and out of control. So it's very unpleasant, it's unconstructive, and you can't think anymore. So the parent, people who wrote these questions, have to take care of themselves first. It'll say that the first thing to do at a cardiac arrest is take your own pulse. You have to be calm. You have to be rational. You have to be problem solving before anything good can be accomplished with the child.
And we do have a lot of questions streaming in on this topic. And one of them is how to, if you do need, in order to remain calm, to, as you said, remove yourself from the situation temporarily, how to communicate to the child that you're not abandoning them, but that you are regulating your own emotions and finding your own calm.
No. A lot of parents will say, I'm putting myself in a timeout. Most kids understand that term. And I'll be back just as soon as, I'm cool, calm, and collected. And then we'll pick up where we left off. Or you say, I see that right now you're completely overwhelmed. I'm going to give you a chance to go aside and come down a couple of notches, and I'll be back in about 10 minutes, and we can pick up here when reason can be heard. When you tell them, you don't allow them to imagine, oh, I'm being abandoned. You say, I'll be back in 10 minutes. And while I'm away, I'm going to be doing the following things to calm down. You become a role model in that way. So just the goal is to get them from being overwhelmed by feelings to talking. When you're talking about something, you're not doing it.
And in your experience, does it work to discuss go-to strategies ahead of time? Absolutely. With your child? Because a lot of people are saying, I try to walk away, my child follows me and even, berates me. Is there something that those parents can do in a calm moment to work on strategies and then just remind their child of those strategies?
That should have been number one. Once you get into one of these storms, there's no rationalizing, there's no teaching, there's no analysis. No, it's your one goal is to get the emotion under control. So you have to have discussed this not once but many times before. And one of the questions that I always ask is, when you blow up on a regular basis, how's that working for you? Does it work well for you? Do you get what you want? And usually the kid will go, no, it doesn't. Nobody likes me at school. And, everybody just yells at each other and I cry and nothing good comes from it. So, okay, good. I'm glad you understand that. Let's start planning about how we prevent those from ever happening. We're not going to wait until you get lost in it. We're going to do all the things ahead of time, such as we're going to make sure that you're not hungry. We're going to make sure that you have something to drink. Those sound so simple, but they work so well. Again, it's just basic nurturance. And also, a lot of these kids have no self-awareness. They don't know when they're hungry. They don't know when they're thirsty. You can help them with trying to recognize what their triggers are being. That if they're on that slippery slope into a meltdown, what are the things that say, uh-oh, I'm going someplace where I don't want to go? What are the techniques I can do to change the course and go someplace else? But prevention. And it's going to be unique for each and every child. I think this is a good place to toss in another notion, and that is, what are realistic goals? It is not a realistic goal that a kid will be calm. That just doesn't happen. What you hope is things are going to be better. They're not going to be as often as close together, as disruptive, and it's going to be an incremental thing where they learn through repetition how to nip it in the bud, to prevent it from going off into a meltdown. But if you have the expectation that you're going to have, all of a sudden your children are going to become Swiss and, just never misbehave, that's not going to happen. So you have to have realistic goals to tell you what success looks like. The other thing is that people can get to these meltdowns in as many ways as there are people. That's going to be one of the big things that handicaps us today is, are we talking about somebody who, is fighting any sort of restrictions on behavior? In other words, a brat. Are we looking at somebody who suddenly has had their brain turn on to oppositional defiant disorder? Because that usually has a sudden onset. Are we looking at somebody who really, what we're seeing is sort of a panic disorder? They're overwhelmed by their own anxiety. Are we looking at somebody with rejection-sensitive dysphoria who can't stand criticism of any sort, or even the perception that there might be something wrong with them? And I can keep going, but those are, some examples. So what we're going to talk about today are really kind of general techniques. When there are specific techniques, we'll say so. But these are a lot of just sort of general techniques that usually work no matter what the source.
Okay. Yes, I think we will circle back to rejection-sensitive dysphoria, because here in the Q&As, we're receiving a lot of questions from adults who are facing challenges with their older children, adolescents, teens, as well as their adult spouses, who they report that any attempt at calming them down is seen as a criticism, to which they react quite over the top, dramatically. Right. Well, we might as well talk about it now.
Okay.
Thoughts on navigating that rejection-sensitive dysphoria, which, like emotional dysregulation, the concept is so
Green.
Universal. Yeah.
Well, it's universal, but it's also new, and people are still talking, arguing about whether it exists or not. And if it does, what are we talking about? And there's also a great divide in that people who have ADHD, usually there's absolutely no question in their minds, ADHD is a thing, because they've lived it, they've seen it in themselves and their kids, no doubt. You take it to a clinician and they go, I've never heard of this, therefore if I haven't heard about it, it doesn't exist. And of course, immediately commit the sin of rejecting and belittling the patient who just came in and told them, this is very important to me. So, I mean, they missed the concept right from the get-go. So it's going to be a while before clinicians get in the game. Right now, most don't know that they don't know and don't care that they don't know. So if finding somebody who at least understands that is going to be the first step. One of the big controversies is about what helps. I am in the school that says because these episodes hit so dramatically, so suddenly, and you've got maybe 2 or 3 seconds to go, uh-oh, I'm going to go into one of those episodes. You're in it. You go from 0 to fuck you that fast. And so there's just no time to say, now, what did my cognitive behavioral therapist say to do? Now, there's no time for that. And so I am one of the people who says, again, preparation is everything. You need to find a medication that works. And there are 2 different classes, but the majority of people with a simple medication with virtually no side effects, it almost goes away completely. So for me, that's just kind of a no-brainer, that you do something quick, easy, etc. But again, it's preparatory. So it's one of those things you can't wait until the event happens and then take a pill. It's something you recognize this can happen anytime, place, situation. So I need to be on medication all the time. And again, for a lot of people, taking medication is just not part of their worldview. But it's been my experience that that's pretty much your choice. You're going to be choosing between having these terribly disruptive episodes or finding a medication that works and leading a normal life.
Is it your finding that the medication actually helps to address the emotional dysregulation, or does it give you the pause to be able to assess your strategies and use your strategies when you become emotionally triggered?
My patients tell me it's kind of a constant protection. The analogy that I've heard from so many patients is that it's like emotional armor, that you still see the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune that last week would have just completely thrown you to the point where you just couldn't function. And now it bounces off without wounding you. That's what the medication does. It is an actual constant protection.
A couple of people are wondering if you can give just a brief overview of the medication options.
Sure.
And I will note that we have whole webinars on this topic.
Yes.
And we will link to those in the resources as well. But for those who are new to ADHD, maybe just a brief overview would be helpful.
Okay. Okay, take a breath. Here we go. On my checklist, the question is, for your entire life, have you always been much more sensitive than anybody else you know to rejection, teasing, criticism, or your own perception that you failed or fallen short? The vast majority of people with ADHD check that positively, but most underline it, put stars by it. This is my major problem. My personal favorite was this caused my first 3 divorces. It is nobody likes being criticized. Nobody likes being rejected. But for people with ADHD, it is catastrophic. They can't get beyond it. Their life shuts down. Their emotional life shuts down. And it's extraordinarily painful. The term dysphoria is literally Greek for unbearable. Because I wanted to get right up in the name how severe this emotional experience was. Just by accident, we stumbled across 2 medications that are called alpha agonists. They were originally blood pressure medications, and the medications are clonidine and guanfacine. And they are already FDA approved for the treatment of the hyperactive component of ADHD. The kid is so hyperactive and impulsive, they're obnoxious and disruptive. And so it's by adjusting the dose, you can bring these folks in for a nice soft landing. They're still who they were. It doesn't change their personality, but it keeps them from being stimulated, overwhelmed, etc. It doesn't turn them into a little zombie. The robust response rate is fairly low to each one. It's about 30% of people get this life-changing level of response, but it's a different 30% to each molecule, so that if the first one doesn't work, you stop it, you try the other one. When you end up trying both of them, the response rate is about 60%, which is in the same realm as the response rate to any psychiatric medication. So they take 5 days for the benefits to develop. So what most people do is they'll start with 1 tablet, assess that at the 5th day. If they're eating better, but they could be better still, you go to 2 tablets, assess that on the 5th day, etc. If you look at all the people who get that, oh, wow, where have you been all my life level of response, 80% of that group is going to optimize at 3 tablets of clonidine or 3 tablets of guanfacine. So it's a very narrow optimal response range.
Okay.
And
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I just wanted to fair balance, talk about the fact, yes, there are side effects. The most common one is feeling mildly sedated, which is why these medications are used as sleeping medication for little kids with ADHD who can't go to sleep. Dry mouth, dizziness when you stand up suddenly. It's just accentuating something that we all have experienced. It's called orthostasis of standing up and feeling a little bit dizzy. And again, that gets better with time.
Okay. Thank you. That's very helpful. And for those who would like to dig deeper, we will definitely provide links to more resources. Dr. Dodson's done a lot of great work for us on this that we have available on attitudemag.com. But so I want to return to strategies. So we have established that emotional dysregulation is part and parcel of ADHD. And I think we should mention as well that ADHD is highly hereditary. So yes, caregivers with emotionally triggered children will have a more difficult time controlling their own responses to those emotions. But let's assume we've used some of these strategies to simmer our own emotions, and now we're ready to respond to the agitated, aggressive, angry other person. Can you offer us some strategies at this point? How should we and should we not approach the situation?
And we're also assuming that we've done all those what a friend of mine calls a little constant attention to the basics. If you're not doing the basics, nothing else going to work. Person's had adequate sleep. They've eaten a good meal. They're not thirsty. They're not dehydrated. And whatever extraneous stress in their life has been addressed aggressively. So we've done our best to stop this from happening at all. What you then do is try to be a mirror to the person so they can see themselves. You try to reflect a person who's calm, cooperative, has their voice under control, so that the patient will see and mirror. You know, when you're with somebody, if they're laughing and stuff like that, you tend to get jolly and laugh along with them. If they're suspicious and paranoid, you tend to get vigilant right along with them. All human beings tend to mirror the person they're with. I would suggest that you minimize gestures, movements, and things like that. Because somebody who is already out of control and maybe feeling threatened, for somebody to make a big gesture or something like that, it's just going to startle them. And you've lost all of the calmness that you've worked so hard to build. Be on the same eye level with the person. A kid's not going to calm down for somebody who's looking down at them. Try to, get down on your knees or something like that so that you're on the same eye level with them. You don't get too close, though. I always say two arm length away from the person. If they want to close that distance, that's okay, but you give them their personal space. You don't stand between them and the door. You also don't let them stand between you and the door. And if things get out of hand, you need an escape route. Try not to argue. Many of the parents out there will know their kid. They'll recognize their kid because they will try and suck them into an absolutely nonsensical argument where there is no right answer. And once you're off in this philosophical question where they've already prepared it and can defeat anything you say, you're no longer working on what the issue is. And these kids are great at diversion. They will get you off down a rabbit hole talking about something else that doesn't matter at all. So you have to always keep coming back. We'll talk about that. That's very philosophical, very interesting. But right now, the only thing we need to be talking about is how upset you are. Yeah, tell me more about what's going on. And I really want to know what you're experiencing. You bring it back and you get them talking again, talking rather than doing. You don't fight with their version of reality. You don't try and correct, what they think is going on. Now you can say, if that were going on, I can understand why or how a person would be upset. You're not saying that they're right or anything like that. You can just say, I understand how this could happen. So that just validate feelings. The human brain can only do one thing at a time. People say that they can multitask. I'm sorry, that's nonsense. You may jump very quickly from one thing to the next. So giving them an exercise to do where you overload that system, where you give them something to drink, something to eat, so they have to be leaving what they were upset about just to have something to drink. Or you can ask them to do breathing exercises or something like that. You say, let's just slow down a bit and take some deep breaths together. I don't want you to focus on your breathing. So as soon as you get them to focus on breathing and how it comes in and how it goes out and stuff like that, they're no longer embedded in their emotional state. So again, you can use diversion just as well as the kid can. Right? It's basically just changing the subject. Asking questions also gets them to divert from being overwhelmed by emotions to rationalized storytelling. You tell them you want to hear their narrative. You want to hear about them, what they're going through, and most people just love that. They want people to be interested in them and to care about what they're thinking and feeling. And you can offer help with, some problem solving. So I see you're very frustrated with having tried so hard and not having anything work. Let's see if we can figure out what we need to do to make this work. on going the exact opposite direction, the kid may be making just utterly outrageous demands. I want you to take my little brother and send him away. Put him with another family, blah, 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 that sort of thing. Their solution is to put the blame on somebody else and a scapegoat, basically, and run them off the cliff. Sometimes just being humorous. You can say, oh, I finally understand why we're having this disconnect. You've mistaken me for somebody who cares. Your demand is so outrageous. Nobody can take you seriously. So let's go back and let's find some way in which you can be taken seriously. Because otherwise, they're just going to keep demanding and demanding, and they'll dig their heels in. That's a very good way. My own kids could never find a way around that one. Or but I can make you wish you had. That's sort of a veiled threat. You don't go any more specific than that, but they know that's true and they really don't want to test it. So there are some ways you can, when they're just off and it's a modified temper tantrum in order to get what they want. Techniques like that, they just end their utility. You're just basically saying this way of trying to cope and solve things is not acceptable. So don't even go there. Let's talk about what would be acceptable. Or you can say, I clearly see that you're upset. There's no doubt that this is an important topic to you. But at the same time, you have to understand that we can't do this to the family. We can't throw the entire family into disarray and pain and things like that. We're going to have to find another way. You're not saying no. You're just saying the method you chose is not acceptable. Families don't do this to each other. You never put them down, shame them, something like that. You just point out that what they're doing doesn't work. And let's think of something else.
Okay.
So
now, a lot of questions coming in regarding in these moments of explosion, children who are disrespecting the parents or educators in some cases, swearing, using foul language. Is this the time to impose consequences in the heat of the moment? And assuming not, how do we return to these and make it clear to the child that that's not our family values or our classroom values, and that behavior is not excused?
No. You have to ask yourself, what is the lesson to be learned? So if I don't know about other people, but it's often in the heat of the moment very difficult for me to distinguish between setting limits and retaliating. If the kid is obnoxious and disruptive and hurting me, disrupting my class, being vulgar, and they're just relentlessly trying to hurt everybody because they want what they want. Consequences, whether you intend it or not, are going to be perceived as punishments. And all you're really teaching is the importance of not being caught. So you're going to make them more devious. They're not going to be as overt in their behavior, but they're still going to do it somehow. So timeouts work. So, I can see, and this is very painful to you, that you've gotten yourself backed into a corner where the only thing that can happen is that you lose. So what I want you to do is I want you to go over there in the back of the room And you're going to work on what's worked in the past when you've gotten this upset. What's been helpful? What's been successful? Because that's what I want is I want you to be strong. I want you to be successful. So you have to offer them what is he going to get? Because just giving him a consequence is going to be perceived as a punishment, and it's on. You hurt me, I'm going to hurt you even worse, and that just degenerates extremely quickly to where the kid quickly becomes. Excuse me, got the hiccups. The kid becomes intolerable, and you have to get the principal involved and the parents involved, and parents are defensive about their kid, and it just spirals in. So most kids want to be heard. They'd like to win, but that's not necessary. They will accept being successful at being heard. And so you sort of set another, what's good enough here? Where do we set the bar?
Mm-hmm. Is that also true for adults? We have a lot of adults listening who are looking for strategies to help them in their adult relationships, whether it's at work or with a spouse or loved one. It seems a lot of these strategies mirroring calm, allowing time for decisions, ignoring challenging questions. Are these equally effective in dealing with adults
Absolutely.
in the midst of a dysregulated time?
Absolutely. Again, they're acting like a child. The types of behaviors they're doing are childlike and immature. So yeah, you use the same techniques. With both children and adults, later on, the argument that will come up is what really happened. I wasn't that bad, or I didn't say that, I didn't do that. Luckily, everyone in the world now, even little kids, carries around a motion picture camera in their phone. Photograph what's going on, so that there's no doubt in anybody's mind what you saw, what you heard. Now they'll be mad. Don't do that. Well, the reason they're mad is they know what they're doing. They know that you now have the upper hand. They don't want objective proof of their behavior. They want to dictate, this is reality, and I'm going to have another fit unless you agree to my version of the facts. So before you photograph somebody, you have to decide that you're going to stick with that course of action, because nothing can be accomplished until we agree on what's real. And we do this all the time with people who are psychotic. For instance, they're in a bipolar mania or schizophrenia or something like that. When they come out of it, they don't remember what happened. And so consequently, they can't learn from events because they don't know what happened. So being able to photograph it is a powerful and necessary step. If after the fact the other person says, no, that never happened. Well, no, I didn't do that. That's when you pull out the phone and say, okay, here's the reality.
Mm-hmm. Right. If you can do so safely.
Yeah. Thank you. If you can do so safely.
Yeah. We do have one question here from an adult that's just come in who says that her partner, who's 45, becomes frustrated, aggressive, and even verbally abusive. It's always my fault, never his, which I know is an ADHD trait. She says, I've tried arguing back. I've tried remaining quiet, talking, walking away. And she's at a loss. What can she do to calm him down in the moment? Can she?
Probably not. not in the moment. It's, again, when you see yourself going in that direction, to redirect it. Also, let me give you a shortened version of this. One of the things that they want to have as a diagnostic criteria for ADHD is a lack of self-appraisal awareness. Again, a fancified term. What it means is most people with ADHD are self-blind. They can't, in the moment, stand back, look at themselves, and say, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling that? What am I thinking? How do other people see me? Is this working for me? Or is it just making things worse? They can't step out of themselves and appraise what they're thinking and feeling in the moment. And sometimes not even in retrospect. Once they get into that emotional state, it's sort of state-specific learning. So again, that's where the camera comes in. But also, after the fact, say, I need for you to teach me what the right things to say are. Because usually when I bring this up, something that's very important to me, you get very defensive. You are really threatened by what I have to say. So I need for you to help me find the words to talk with you about this. Well, of course, you have already opened this subject. You've already talked about it. But by asking for his help in dealing with this, you've sort of nipped that degeneration into a fight or defensiveness. You're asking him to stay engaged in the process of mastering this. So that helps a lot, but it can't be in the moment. It has to be another time. Also, never start a conversation like this after 8 o'clock at night. Nothing ever good happens after 8 o'clock at night.
It's a good rule. Yeah.
That's a good rule for life. Dr. Dodson's rules for life.
If you take nothing else away.
Just look at your watch. It's 7:59. Just no. I'm gonna go have that last piece of pie that's in the fridge. You'll be happier with that choice.
There is another tricky nuance that I want to make sure that we get to, and that is, I'll read you the question. As a wife and mother living with two ADHD males, both a spouse and a child, they can have explosive verbal arguments. They each want to have the last word. What are some techniques I can use to help when both of them are going from 0 to 10? So you are like the moderator between this explosive parent-child interaction. Quite a few referees in the audience today could use some strategies for in the moment.
Right. Well, as they would with boxers in the ring, first thing they do is tell them to go to neutral corners and separate them, put them in different rooms. They can't fight with each other in different rooms. Also, with the husband, you say, you expect you to respond better than a child. You want to be a good role model to our son. So let's start talking about the things you can do instead of being a negative role model and just mirroring back to him what he's doing. What are the things you can do so that you will be admirable and you'll be proud of what your response was? People want to be successful. They want to be proud of themselves. So that's what you offer them. If you change your behavior, you get something for that. You get pride. You get a better relationship with your son, that sort of thing. With the son, you go out and do the opposite of, yeah. Are you proud about how that went? And when you get into the arguments like this with your dad, how's that working for you? Does that work out in a way that gets you anything at all? So let's talk about how you can get your dad to hear you. And so you're talking about, your goal is to be heard, acknowledged, validated, not necessarily agreed with, but at least what you think and feel is valid and important to your parents. Yeah, so just getting people to talk with each other in a civil, polite way. I mean, if I could, I'd have the whole nation doing that. It just seems as a nation we can't do that, but we could start with one family at a time. It's how do we talk together?
Right. And you mentioned that during those calmer moments when we can begin working on strategies, you mentioned deep breathing as one strategy that we can begin to learn and fall back on. Yeah. Are there others that we can work on arming our loved ones with to help in those moments?
Yeah. The thing is, anything that distracts them from the emotion is going to be helpful. Counting the tiles in the ceiling, for instance. Again, they've gotten out of the emotions into a non-emotional task, counting ceiling tiles. Or sitting there and it's almost getting them to be OCD, to count the number of letters and words or something like that. You're doing whatever that person will do to get off the subject. Those are the types of things. And again, it's going to be a different thing for each person. But again, it's just a change. It doesn't largely matter to what. It's just to stop going down the rabbit hole of being out of control emotionally to doing something that takes their attention to counting ceiling tiles. So that's always the first step, is changing, getting them out of being stuck in a situation that can only go from bad to worse.
Right. And it's in some ways that's like a mindfulness technique, sort of a creative one, but it's awareness in your surroundings that is outside of your emotional body.
Right. The thing is that a lot of times, though, and again, I will caveat this, where for a lot of people, medications are just not part of how they think of the world. But all of the things that we've been talking about are deeply genetic and neurologic. We now know that oppositional defiant disorder is genetic, biological, neurological. It is how you're wired. And consequently, behavioral techniques don't work well in older people, and especially if they have ADHD. So I suggest to people that they at least try what medication has to offer, so that they'll make their decision based on knowledge, facts, and not political beliefs. So try it, see what it has to offer. If it doesn't work, you get rid of it. If it does work, it'll change their lives. Mm-hmm. It'll save their lives. So it's give it a try. Mm-hmm. And as a caveat with that, find a doc who knows what he's doing. If a doc says, well, I don't do much ADHD, take him at his word. It says, well, who would you refer me to? A lot of people will stick with their pediatrician, even though their pediatrician has tried to warn them that he doesn't know what he's doing. So if somebody says, well, I don't know that much about it, listen to them and go to somebody else, at least for a consultation.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I will mention that we do on the Attitude website have a directory of MDs, PhDs, PsyDs, all who have experience in ADHD. So if you are looking for someone who is more of a specialist, that is one place to start. There are some other good, Psychology Today has a good directory as well. So there are specialists out there. It's not easy always to get in to see them, but they are out there. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The other thing is join CHAD or NADA and go to their meetings. These are people who are just a year ahead of you in their passage. And you ask them who's good, who's not good, that sort of thing. Use their real life knowledge of the resources in your community. These people know from personal experience.
Great. Well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news. We are out of time today. Dr. Dodson, thank you so much for being here today and for lending, your thoughtful expertise to this really important conversation. I think we all walked away with some greater understanding of ADHD and emotional dysregulation, and also some strategies that we can try to put into place. So thank you for being here.
My pleasure. And just think of all the articles you have now. Just take these letters and answer them, and you get an article out of each one.
Oh my goodness. More than 200 questions have streamed in during our live conversation. So 200 articles are coming right up.
But I think that's a measure of how big a problem this is.
Agreed. And we will do our best.
Don't be alone with it.
Mm-hmm. You are not alone. We are here to help, and there are other people who have ideas as well. So thank you, everyone who did join us today, submitted your questions, and joined the conversation. You are why we are here, and we are so honored at Attitude to call you our community. So thank you for joining. I did want to mention that we are working on our next installment for the Mental Health Out Loud series. If you have an idea, a topic that you would like for us to cover, way that we can help you, you can tell us now in the comments. You can also always email us at customerservice@attitudemag.com, and of course visit us online. So until next time, thank you again, Dr. Dodson, and thank you everyone out there for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
For more Attitude podcasts and information on living well with attention deficit, visit attitudemag.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com.